say that it is hopeless.
Haleth, son of Hammer. There is always hope.
So let's talk about Rings of Power. I want to say that I'm not a diehard Tolkien fan or Lord of the Rings fan. I'm not a Tolkien scholar, whatever that means. I just read The Lord of the Rings, read The Hobbit, read The Silmarillion back when I was a teenager. I enjoyed the books very much. I watched all the movies. This is a video that I have been wanting to make for a long time, but I haven't got around to it, mainly because I needed to watch some episodes and I didn't want to criticize the show before I really watched it, before I got into it. And let me tell you that it has been a dreadful job to actually get into the show because it is horrible. There's so many wrong things with it at so many levels that I don't even know where to start. The first thing that I will say is that it's a cheap copy of The Lord of the Rings. It's almost obnoxious how many things they try to copy.
I have said it already, 100 times over, in every way but words.
And to that I hold. I would rather share one lifetime with you than face all the ages of this world alone.
It's insane. It's like scene by scene or emotion. Let's say the emotions that The Lord of the Rings tried to convey and actually succeeded at conveying, they tried to mimic in almost every way. It's too noticeable for me and it became annoying the way they tried to do it. They just play on our sense of nostalgia to get us to like the show. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. The diversity message, it's a punch in the face with every episode that you watch. And let's forget about the diverse cast that they pushed into the show. That's not what Tolkien wrote about. The only reason why they had the liberty of doing that is because they don't have any books to actually draw from to write the material or to write the characters for the show. There's only appendices and there's only, maybe we could say, the Silmarillion, which I read. If you thought The Hobbit was a bad movie, the Hobbit trilogy, well, you are going to kiss Peter Jackson's ass. Going back to the diversity of the cast, I'm willing to look beyond the changes that they made to what Tolkien wrote. I'm willing to accept that in today's day and age, you have to make the cast diverse because otherwise people are going to criticize you. And okay, I can live with that. But what I cannot live with is the change of the characters' motivations that has been already set in the books and in Lord of the Rings. And of course, you know who I'm talking about, Galadriel. It's way too much. She's always right. She can never do no wrong. Everyone else, it's trying to put her down. Only she knows what's the right thing to do. Everyone else is completely getting in her way of achieving the right thing for Middle Earth. She has no regard for her people. She has no regard for the humans. She's just above everything. She's above moral rights or wrongs. And anything she does should be regarded as the right thing.
There is a tempest in me. It swept me to this island for a reason, and it will not be quelled by you, Regent.
Open war is upon you, whether you would risk it or not.
When last I looked, Theoden, not Aragorn, was king of Rohan.
And that's because, of course, in today's day and age, in today's movies and in today's TV shows, a woman can never do no wrong. A woman can never do anything that goes against the moral and right thing to do. It's really hard to feel engaged with the show, to feel empathy or to feel connected with the character that I'm watching if there's no repercussions for being an obnoxious person? If everything you do is right, then what's the point of character development, of character arc? If we cannot identify with some of the traits that human beings have with the character, as growing, being wrong in something and finding out why you're being wrong, why you're being a stupid person, why you're behaving in a wrong manner, and then correcting those behaviors, then what motivations do I have to feel connected to the character that I'm watching? What makes a good character good is having human motivations that we as the audience can connect with. If everything they do is completely above moral responsibilities because they can never be wrong in anything, and everything they do is on behalf of the good, and don't try to question that, because if you question that, you're a misogynistic son of a bitch.
Cast it into the fire! Destroy it! No. Isildur!
How can I be invested in the story that you're telling me? And she's just one character. The Queen of Numenor, I forgot about the books. Like I said, I read them when I was a teenager. I would put my hand on a fire and I would bet that there was no queen. There were kings, because that's how the line of kings of Numenor passed from king to king to king. It's just a show about diversity, about inclusion, about how bad the patriarchy is, that has the name of Lord of the Rings slapped on top of it. It's not a show about Lord of the Rings, about the Silmarillion, about the second age of Middle-earth. It's not a show about that. It's a show about how women can never be wrong, how diverse cast has to be slapped on the show, about how men and the patriarchy are always doing something to oppress either the oppressed people or women. It's just a continuous, non-stop preaching, I would say subvertly, all those messages. So the only thing that it has in connection to Lord of the Rings is the name, the names of some characters. That's it. It's a completely different show. I think that what's happening here is the same thing that happened with Game of Thrones, with the last, I think it's 2 seasons or 3 seasons of Game of Thrones. I can't really remember the exact amount, but it's the same thing that happened with the last seasons of Game of Thrones. The producers of the show had nothing to go from. They didn't have any book to base the last seasons off, so they just invented the dialogue. They had some input from George R.R. Martin, but they basically just invented the whole thing, and people were not happy. People didn't like the last seasons of Game of Thrones. Why? Because it wasn't what George R.R. Martin would have done, and it was apparent that it was not in line with the rest of the seasons. They changed it completely. And this is the exact same thing. The writers of The Rings of Power had no dialogues to go from. They didn't have a book that was written by J.R.R. Tolkien to base The Rings of Power. They just invented the dialogues, invented the story arcs. And what goes to show is that the immense genius that J.R.R. Tolkien had in writing these books cannot be cheaply copied, cannot be mimicked. And especially if you try to enforce your own opinions about the times you live in, it just doesn't work. I don't think that J.R.R. Tolkien, when he wrote these books, he had any, let's say, political or sociological message to try to push on you. He just wrote a great story, one of the greatest stories ever to be written, and he didn't try to push any beliefs that he had on you. What he did was write about what he felt, and he let the characters develop instead of having the story develop a message that he wants to push upon you. And I'm going to end the video with this beautiful quote that J.R.R. Tolkien wrote. Evil cannot create anything new. They can only corrupt and ruin what good forces have invented or made. And that's exactly what the Rings of Power is. A cheap copy to ruin something good that has already been invented. Thank you very much for watching, and like always, see you in the next one.